Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Lauren Williams, Adult and Community Services Manager for the Columbia Public Library, which is part of the Daniel Boone Regional Library System. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn, where we will be learning about climate action goals for the City of Columbia. And today's Lunch and Learn is co-hosted by the library and the League of Women Voters of Columbia Boone County. Before we begin our program, the usual housekeeping notes. Our presenter will be taking questions at the end of the presentation. So to ask questions, just find that chat feature of Zoom. If you hover over your Zoom window, it should be in your taskbar at the bottom, or you may have to tap in the middle of your screen if you're on a tablet or a smartphone. Click that speech bubble and type in your question there. If during the Q&A you want to unmute to ask a question, to participate in discussion, click your raise hand tool and I can unmute you to let you ask a question. We are recording this presentation, so it will be available in the next day or two on both the League's YouTube channel and the library's YouTube channel for future viewing. And now I'd like to welcome our moderator, League of Women Voters of Columbia Boone County President, Barbara Hoppe. Thanks, Barbara.
Thank you, Lauren, and thank you as always to the Columbia Public Library for co-hosting our Lunch and Learn programs, and especially today's Valentine's Day Lunch and Learn program. And I can't think of a better way to celebrate Valentine's Day than to focus on how we can and must address climate change in Columbia, and to show our love and caring and commitment to present and future generations. So today we're delighted to welcome Carolyn Amporan, chair of the local Sierra Club, to discuss the crucial issue of climate change and how Columbia can successfully achieve 100% renewable energy locally by 2030, and more as importantly, what you can do to help make that happen. Carolyn is the chair of the Sierra Club Osage group and has been for several years. Previously, she was on the Columbia Climate and Environment Commission, and we're thankful that she has been diligently and intensely engaged in climate change education and solutions for the last 10 years. Before that, her professional background is in information technology, marketing, and business development. And this anniversary of her joining her first protest march to address climate change. So it's very timely for her to address us this month on this very crucial. Carolyn, I'll hand the program to you.
Okay, thank you. You were breaking up a little bit there. Okay, well, I see I didn't start on the first page. Let me back up here real quick. Okay, well, hello, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I appreciate this series that is hosted by the League and by the library. And as was said, we're going to talk about, this is going to be kind of an update on our climate action goals and some of the progress that's been made. And then we'll also talk throughout about the things that you can do to help. So we will be talking about, just a level set in case anyone is new to this topic, why this focus on the changing climate is important and why we need to take action. We'll talk about some of the priority goals. There's 160 actions in the climate action plan that the city adopted back in 2019. So we have to, just focus on some of those goals each year. And the ones I'm going to talk about today happen to be a joint focus, both from the Climate and Environment Commission, as well as areas that are really key to the work that Sierra Club does, both nationally and locally. And then another important priority for the Sierra Club, and really should be for everyone, is this idea of climate justice and equity, making sure that we're considering how climate is going to impact everyone and what we can do about it. And then, as Barbara said, we'll talk about how you can help, and that's actually built throughout the presentation, and then I've got some wrap-up comments on that as well. I did want to mention, in case you are new to this topic, that there's been 2 prior lunch and learns that would help you get more detail in case you're saying, well, I really want to understand, something more in depth than what I'm giving today. Back in April of 2021, there was a climate action plan overview, which actually kind of covered the basics about the city's climate action plan. And then in January of 2022, we took a deep dive into this topic of trying to reach 100% renewable energy by 2030 and how we can do that, why it's possible, what are some of the key considerations. And then I also wanted to let you know that the city has a dashboard and a couple of websites where you can get updates from the city on an ongoing basis or check some of the progress statistics. And they also have a newsletter that you can sign up for that comes out about once a month that shares progress as well as tips for things that you can do yourself to live a more sustainable life, oftentimes with really minimal change or discomfort, no discomfort, I would say. So in case you're not familiar with Sierra Club, I just wanted to spend a minute on that. Sierra Club is the oldest and largest grassroots environmental advocacy organization in the United States. It is completely volunteer-led. Obviously, we have some staff, but volunteers are the ones that really set the agenda and the priorities at all levels, national, state, and local. And here in Columbia, we're completely volunteer. We don't actually have any local staff in Columbia. So all the work that you see that the Sierra Club does gets done by someone who's volunteering. As I said, the organization works at the local, state, and federal levels, as well as we have a mission. Our mission is to explore, enjoy, and protect the planet. The other thing I wanted to mention is that it's always a big help for us when we go in to advocate for a position to be able to say, well, we have this many members in Columbia or this many members in Boone County or this many members at the state, because that gives us the political power. So if you would be interested in joining or donating or volunteering, we would welcome that. You can have your initial joining fee is as low as $15. So it's very small amount to join. And if you ever have any questions, I've included our email address here as well. And we're also on Facebook for those of you who are there. Well, let's get into the meat of this. So why is the climate crisis so urgent? Well, hopefully, everyone has observed by themselves the experience of our changing weather. I mean, like yesterday, not just yesterday, but numerous days in January and February, we've had really warm weather. And although it's lovely to have a break from the cold, it's also a sign of warming trends. We must keep global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius to avoid really tragic impacts globally and locally. And the world has already warmed 1 degree Celsius. The United States, for a long time, was the largest producer of greenhouse gas emissions. We've now been surpassed by China. But as you guys know, a lot of what China produces ends up back in the United States in terms of products. And we're still the second largest producer. So we have great responsibility to take action to avoid, this climate crisis and weather impacts that we're all experiencing and will only get worse if we don't act. The United States has made a commitment to reduce emissions, 50 to 52% by 2030. And the really important thing here is that the scientists have agreement, a consensus globally, that we must take significant action in the next 7 years to reduce emissions. And we're not talking, small incremental cuts like have been being made the last decade. We're talking, like 40, 50% cuts need to be made in the next 7 to 8 years. So this is where we, really get into, we have to be aggressive and we have to focus on the areas of biggest emissions and the areas where we can make a big impact with what we're doing. So in Columbia, for us to do our part, one of the easy, efficient ways for us to make big changes is in our category of electricity production. Fortunately, we own our own electricity utility, and that's, something that's centralized and is able to do, because, one decision or by the city council and the utility, and they're changing electricity for all of us, is easier and more efficient than, 2,000, 50,000 homes all having to make separate decisions about cutting back on their energy usage. So if they make the energy clean for all of us, and it's really a benefit. And so right now, 42% approximately of Columbia's emissions come from our electricity production. Another thing is, I'm sure you're all aware, every day there's some type of weather or disaster, fires, droughts, floods, hurricanes on the news. And for the last 2 years in a row, both 2021 and 2022, extreme weather has cost the United States more than $100 billion. So, the cost of climate change is happening. And it's going to get worse if we don't invest in doing the things we need to do to stop it. And then with our focus on climate equity, I wanted to mention that the people that have the least resources, which are often women and children, often, as we know, women around the world are not educated as well. Those people are the ones that experience the most harm from the climate impacts because they just don't have the resources to respond. And that can be true here in the United States or in countries that are already experiencing climate impacts like Nicaragua, the Philippines, and others. So let's get into what some of the goals are. And I'll give you a brief update on where each of these stand in progress. So as Barbara mentioned, one of our key goals that we've been working on for a few years now is to get Columbia to commit to 100% clean renewable energy for Columbia Water and Light by 2030. And we hope to get that commitment sometime this year. There is a project underway to adopt minimum energy efficiency standards for rental housing. I'll talk more about that. There are the next round of building codes for energy conservation. And there's a project to reduce energy demand in all city buildings. So we'll get into a little more detail on each of these. So regarding the goal of 100% renewable energy by 2030. Now, as I mentioned, there's a whole deep dive presentation on this that you could go back to. So I'll just hit a few points here today. One important point is that the city really cannot achieve our 2035 emission reduction goals without investing in 100% clean renewable energy. Most of the other areas are just, it would require two mental projects, not the biggest chunk of emissions in the city. So the easiest way and the most efficient way for us to get there is really to tackle this electricity problem. And really the other reason, of course, that we have to do this is we must reduce our greenhouse gas emissions really to stop runaway climate change. Right now, our city ordinance only calls for us to get to 30% renewable energy by 2029. That is just not enough. I mean, it was great that Columbia was one of the leaders that established renewable energy goals a long time ago, but times have changed. The science has shown us that we have to move more aggressively. So where are we? Well, we had an integrated electric resource study that was done and delivered to City Council about a year ago, but for various reasons, they felt a lot of that information wasn't detailed enough or current enough because of the changes in the energy market prices. So they, along with the utility, the City Council, along with the utility, decided to hire a company called the Energy Authority to work on a detailed study that would provide some very specific scenarios for how we as a community can get to 100% clean energy by 2030, how much it might cost, cost projections, what are some of the various ways we can get there using solar, using wind. And then we also have regulatory commitments we have to meet about how much capacity, meaning the ability to produce energy, is always available. So as a utility, there's regulations that they have to meet. And then, of course, we all want, to be able to use our electricity 24/7 when we want it. So, that this study will help the City Council and the utility get more detailed information on that. The report's going to be delivered sometime in the second quarter. So what can you do to help and us make sure this gets over the finish line this year and we get a new ordinance that's going to make the commitment? Well, we have a City Council election coming up on April 4th. There are going to be candidates running in wards 1 and 5, and the Sierra Club, along with other co-sponsoring organizations, is hosting a candidate forum that will focus on clean energy and climate change on March 15th at 7 p.m. in the Boone County Commission chambers. And at this time, we're also planning to have that available simultaneously via a Zoom meeting. So, look for that. You can find information online from Sierra Club or the Peace Works at this point, and maybe other organizations. So in the future, we're also going to be having speakers at City Council again. We'll try and communicate those dates so you can come and show your support. Right now, even though the report is not going to be here for a few months, it still is a good time to contact City Council if you haven't already, and express your support to your council person and the mayor, for moving forward with this commitment. And then anyone who's a member of an organization, and this can be anything from, Girl Scouts to a church to some other kind of organization, a business, you can sign a letter of support. And so we've got the URLs in here for where you can access those letters of support. When we were actively focused on collecting these, we had gotten over, 55, 60 of them. Anybody new that wants to sign it would be great, because we can, represent those when the report becomes available and we're in front of City Council again. On the rental energy efficiency standards, why is this important? So it's important because renters, not always, but many oftentimes have lower income than levels than household property owners. And so what happens then is that they end up spending a really high or higher percentage of their income to pay for their utility bills. And this can often lead to financial difficulties. It turns out research has shown that, for example, one of the main reasons that people take out payday loans is to pay their utility bill. And so, this can definitely be an energy burden on these households. The other reason this is important in Columbia is that over 50% of our housing inventory is rental units because of, our being a college town, for one thing. And so, these standards could have a big impact on us, really lowering our energy demand. Another reason it's important to have these standards is because landlords, we have what we call a split incentive, because landlords many times don't pay the utility bill. So they're not motivated to make their properties energy efficient. And a lot of our rental units here in town are old. Some of them are new, which is great. Those are going to be more energy efficient because of the building codes. But the old ones are probably not. So we need to motivate those landlords to make at least minimum, and I'm not talking, Cadillac energy efficiency here. I'm talking minimum energy efficiency. And then the other good benefit for all of us is that when all this rental housing would be energy efficient, it would actually help keep our peak demand for electricity down. And that actually helps stabilize rates for all of us, because we don't have to keep adding so much capacity to our network of energy production. So the status on this is that in 2022, the Climate and Environment Commission submitted a proposal to the City Council, and it was well supported by city staff. So the City Council approved the city staff to begin working on this project. And where they are right now is they're conducting surveys of renters. So today is the deadline day for taking the survey. I've included the link here. You can find it on beheard.como.gov. So if you're a renter, I strongly encourage you to take this survey. If you're not a renter, you can help by sharing it with, friends or family, or on social media that are renters. Next step is focus groups with stakeholders. And so stakeholders could be landlords, they could be tenants in different parts of town, they could be realtors, care about this too. So if you would like to participate in a focus group for whatever stakeholder category you fall into, you can reach out to the city and raise your hand to participate. So I've included the information here on how to do that. And so at some point in the future, I expect it's going to be many months yet, but we'll be reaching out to ask people to support these standards when they come forward for adoption. Building codes. We are really fortunate here in Columbia that we are on the 2018 Energy Conservation Codes for residential and commercial. And this means that every new building that gets built in town is going to have some pretty decent level of energy efficiency in it. And the good thing is, I often get contacted about people wanting to make sure the schools that are being built are energy efficient. Well, because of these codes that our city council passed, they are going to be energy efficient. Now, there's always room for improvement as new technology comes out, but we have a good base level with the 2018 codes, and we are one of the few communities in Missouri who was assertive enough to get those in place, and wisely got those in place. And why do we want these codes? Because again, it helps you not have to have every independent contractor making their own decision about, is this home going to be energy efficient or not? It just says that every building, home, school, firehouse, warehouse is going to be energy efficient if it's built new going forward. And so that is a really efficient way to do it. The international body that sets these standards tries, they do the work to make sure that all of these things are cost effective, so that if you invest in them, there's a, certain payback period in them, so that they're, not just overkill, that they're actually financially reasonable as well as environmentally reasonable. Where we are right now in evaluating the 2021 codes is normally they would have been approved by now, but the group that was working on this found that, because of all the supply chain constraints that have impacted us, the world, that there were some constraints that builders wouldn't be able to get some of the materials they would need to be in compliance. So they the Building Code Commission wanted to wait. So now they're in discussions with the Climate and Environment Commission, and hopefully they'll be coming forward with a report to the City Council in the next 2 months, recommending the adoption of these. And we're hoping to get that adopted before the end of September, so that these can be implemented to start with the fiscal year that begins in October. And how you could help? Well, one thing you could do right now is just go ahead and contact your city council members and the mayor to ask for adoption of these 2021 energy conservation building codes, so it stays on their priority list. Then I just wanted to share this next one because I wanted people to know that the city actually is making progress on the cap. A lot of people, since it doesn't make the newspaper or the news, they think, oh, we're not doing anything, but we are. So one of our, another key way that we can reduce energy demand in the city is by making city buildings more energy efficient. And the city, of course, has control of that. And so for all the energy we save, we're reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The other benefit of this is that as the city makes their buildings more efficient and figures out this benchmarking, then at some point in the next, some near-term future, they can turn around and share all this information with our commercial building owners in the city about how they can make their plants, their warehouses, their restaurants, whatever, more efficient. And the good news is, for every dollar they save on energy efficiency, that's another dollar they can invest in other climate action priorities. And then for all of us, as the city improves their usage of electricity, that reduces the peak demand for Columbia Water and Light. And again, that stabilizes rates for all of us. So the city has a reduction goal for its own facilities of a 20% reduction. And this was part of the climate action plan to reduce that by 2025. They've already benchmarked a lot of their buildings, and by benchmarking, they just figure out how much energy it's using, what type, and per square foot and that type of thing. So they've already benchmarked 36 of their buildings, and that was what they called their Group 1 buildings. Group 2 will be finished by June of this year. And if you'd like to read the detailed report on that, it's available online on como.gov. It's the benchmarking report. And now that they have that information on those 36 buildings, they're prioritizing the energy efficient improvements they need to do. And they even have been pursuing grant funding from outside sources to make some of those improvements happen. And so this project is well underway. I don't think they need to contact the city council or the government about it. But what you can do to help in this area is pursue your own benchmarking and improvements in your own building or with your employer to ask, what are we doing to improve energy efficiency in our own environment. So then the next big area of emissions in Columbia is transportation. And there's a few key projects here. One is related to street design standards that make it easier and safer for people to walk and bicycle and ride public transit, but still making room for vehicles. Also reducing the emissions from the city's vehicles. And then finally, improving overall our bus service. So just to touch on some of these, on the street design standards, there was a lunch and learn from this series in November given by Local Motion, who is the lead sponsor for this project, and Sierra Club is a co-sponsor. And so you could go back to that presentation for much more detail. But basically the idea here is that in order for me to get out of my car and to walk to a nearby vendor or grocery store, for example, I need to feel safe doing that. And so it's about making people feel safe It's about equity so that people that don't have cars can get around town and, find a job, go to the doctor, do all those things they need to do. And of course, for every mile we don't travel in our personal cars, we're reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So I would encourage you just to stay informed on this campaign and to support it as it moves forward. There probably will be a recommendation to the City Council this year on a specific policy for them to adopt. And once they adopt that, then the next step will be that the city will actually develop new street design standards. Regarding the city's fleet. So the city, we all, of course, think, oh, the city should get all electric vehicles. That would be great. But one of the reasons this is important is that the city fleet accounts for about 9% of the city's greenhouse gas emissions. And not only can we reduce emissions by not using fossil fuels for our cars, trucks, buses, whatever that the city owns, we can also reduce air pollution. And from a taxpayer perspective, it's great because electric vehicles also usually have lower maintenance costs. So the city has made some progress in this area. In 2021, they invested in automatic vehicle locators to help them understand what's going on with their vehicles. They've also already purchased multiple buses that use either compressed natural gas or electricity. Now they're moving forward, well, in the future, it should be all electricity buses, but they did want to make sure they had gained some experience with the buses, the first buses that they bought before they invested in more electric buses. So I think we're on a path now that all the buses will be electric going forward. Unfortunately, there's a lot of state and federal grant money that enables those purchases. The city also has invested in some electric vehicle charging stations in city garages, but we'd like to certainly see them do more of that. So the Climate and Environment Commission and the city staff developed a fleet electrification policy. It spent all of 2022 in review, and I contacted the city manager yesterday. It's in review and modification. So hopefully that formal policy will be adopted soon. But meanwhile, I do believe that the fleet operations is moving forward with starting to purchase more electric vehicles. And so what you can do there is, of course, start looking at your own modes of transportation. And then also, now's a good time to ask the city council members to prioritize purchasing vehicles that don't use fossil fuels, because these purchases come up before the city council at just random times. And so it's kind of hard to monitor exactly when those are going to be happening, but it never hurts to state your opinion so that they know it's something that you care about. Bus service. Bus service is still no charge here in Columbia, so that's great. And one of the reasons that we need a better bus service is, one, because every time any of us takes a trip on the bus instead of a private car, it reduces greenhouse gas emissions. As they convert those buses to electric energy, there's a further reduction. So using public transit is good. Right now, the city is experiencing a shortage of bus drivers, and that's impacting service and routes. So if you know anyone who would be interested in becoming a bus driver, the city is very eager to help them get their commercial driver's license. And in some cases, you don't even have to have a commercial driver's license to drive some of the vans. So, encourage people to consider that as a job opportunity. The city has in the budget for this year to conduct a transit study. And so they've been collecting input on what that study should include, and they're preparing to go out for vendor proposals. And so we're hoping that out of this transit study, we'll get the information and the good ideas needed for really how to take Columbia's public transit to the next level. Okay, so I have tried to talk about climate justice throughout some of these goals and the status on them, but I did want to just take a minute to focus on it in particular. And as I mentioned at the beginning, it's so important because the people without resources, whoever they are, financial resources is mostly what I'm referring to. They're the ones that are going to be most impacted when there's floods or when there's a tornado or a major windstorm, something that destroys property and homes. And so these are things that we have to be conscious of, or even when prices go up because maybe there's a drought and for like, we've seen that already happen in the past where beef prices suddenly shot up because there's a drought and they decided to start reducing the number of cows in the herd and things like that. So there can be all kinds of climate impacts that drive up prices or drive up costs. And so we just have to make sure that we keep that front and center in all plans and decisions. And unfortunately, the city manager is actually looking at, with his staff, on how to make sure that these, that not only is climate change considered in all major decisions, but that equity and climate justice is considered in all these decisions. So they're working at inserting something in the decision-making process where it's like, you have to go through that step. You can't just forget about it. The other thing I wanted to mention is there's already quite a number of energy efficiency programs that are available to offset potential increases in energy bills, either because of higher, energy usage because of these hot temperatures that we've had last summer and will likely have again this summer, or because of increases in electric rates due to renewable energy conversion. Now, we don't really think there's going to be a lot of more costs because of converting to renewable energy, because those prices have come down so dramatically, but it's possible. And so the thing to do now is to be focusing on making your property more energy efficient. There's a lot of ways that will happen. I've already talked about the rental standards. The federal government is investing a lot of money in energy efficiency improvements for owner-occupied, low-income qualifying families, or it can be tenant-occupied, low-income qualifying families with landlord approval. So if you know someone who would be income qualifying and they live in a home that has not had energy efficiency improvements through this program already, then they should contact Central Missouri Community Action and see about what kind of improvements they can have made to their home. And it's at no charge. So that's great. Then the city has Columbia Water and Light, and there's also programs available from Boone Electric and Ameren. There are other programs that people can take advantage of. The ones that are really most helpful, I think, to income qualifying households is the window AC unit swap. So if you've got like a really old window AC unit or it's broken, frankly, you can take it in when this program is working in service, which is not, I don't think it is right now, but it will be as the weather warms up, and swap it for a new, more efficient window unit. You can get a free residential energy and water assessment. That's true even if you're a tenant. They will just suggest things to you that you can do, that don't involve the landlord. The city has some energy efficiency kits they're passing out that include things like LED light bulbs. There's a whole income qualifying aspect to the Enhanced Home Performance with Energy Star program, which is the big, more encompassing program. And you can find out about all of that by either searching on or going to Columbia Power Partners link that I've included here. And there's a whole lot of other issues, that we need to be thinking about. Columbia has some homes that are in the floodplain, and there needs to be buyouts of those if the people are willing. There's transportation issues. We've had a lot of focus on trying to, do better by our unhoused population, and that's great. We have to keep that moving forward, because when it's super cold or when it's super hot, which both things we seem to be having with climate change, those are, major risk to the unhoused population. And then a lot of people don't necessarily have air conditioning in their homes, and so access to cooling is important. And this is becoming even more important at night. And traditionally, a lot of cooling centers would not be open at night, but a lot of nights now in the summertime, it's not getting cooler than 80 degrees, and that's one of the symptoms of climate change. And then, of course, we have to be prepared for disasters and not be caught like New Orleans was, where there was a lot of people that couldn't evacuate because they didn't have cars and there was no plan for that. And so we have to make sure we factor in disaster planning from a climate justice equity perspective. So in general, how can you help? Well, in addition to the things I've mentioned throughout, focusing on your own energy efficiency, and even just as simple as not running your appliances during peak hours, which are 4 to 7 p.m. in the summertime. you know, you could just not do the dishwasher, not do the clothes, laundry, whatever in that time period. Just even that helps. But there's a lot of other things you can do. There's great programs available to provide rebates for switching to heat pumps. There's LED lighting rebates. There's going to be a whole lot of new things coming from the federal government in terms of tax credits. So check out all those. There's incentives to install solar on your home or business. If your appliances are 20 years old, you might consider, or in that neighborhood, you might consider going ahead and switching from your gas to electric appliances and choosing Energy Star certified. Not only does gas cause indoor air pollution, it produces greenhouse gas emissions. So we all need to start having a plan to get those out of our homes and making the conversion. So if you're buying a new appliance, don't buy gas, buy electric, and check out what kind of incentives are available to help you do that. And I would just ask that you all continue to follow the progress on the Climate Action Plan. And with that, we can open it up for questions.
All right, thank you so much, Carolyn, for that really comprehensive and detailed presentation, as well as lots of specific ways that we can act to help. And I was just thinking, well, hopefully the league will send out regular emails to our members for action on the various different items. So regularly follow up. So let's see, going to the questions. Pam Springstill says, are there state statutes that are limiting or helpful to climate action?
There are some state statutes that, one that in particular that passed last year that is, I would call limiting, in the sense that they were protecting natural gas vendors and suppliers by saying that, for example, that communities could not mandate that new homes be built without natural gas. Some states or cities have already started moving forward with saying that new construction needs to not use natural gas because, frankly, we need to eliminate it. So, why keep building new buildings with it? And unfortunately, our state passed a rule that said the city could not mandate that. So people can still choose to eliminate it and go all electric, but the city can't mandate it. Now, this year, the state legislature, which is in session right now, is considering some other things that could be a problem. One is that, and the city hasn't tried to say that this needs to happen, but the city could at some point put in the building codes, for example, that, maybe if you're building a new multi-unit apartment complex, you need to put in electric vehicle charging stations easily accessible to the residents. Well, the state legislature is trying to pass a bill that would say if the city mandates it, the city has to pay for it. And of course, we have all kinds of building codes that mandate things that the city doesn't pay for. They're just for the public good. But that's just an example of one that they are pursuing. The state legislature is, and there's a lot of others. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but Sierra Club does maintain an active list of bills that we're either for or against. And I'd be happy to make that available to anybody who's interested. It is something that I can share. So you could contact us at sc.midmo.group@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to share that list with you.
Great. There's a question that it says, may I share material from the newsletter and tips with other groups? I guess, I'm not sure if that's what the League of Women Voter newsletter or the Sierra Club also has a newsletter.
We might be referring to the city's newsletter too. The City of Columbia, you can go to the sustainability section of the city's website and sign up for the city's sustainable newsletter. And they give updates on what is being done progress-wise, as well as offer tips. And so, and also if you're on Facebook, you can find a link to that under the cities or some of the past newsletters under this City of Columbia Sustainability Office on Facebook.
And I would add that the league is always happy for people to share information that we have on our web or newsletter, or these lunch and learn programs or other programs that you can get on YouTube. We welcome people sharing it with more people. So please do that. Now there's another question. Does the Sierra Club have a formal relationship with the City of Columbia, or do you serve in a more informal advisory capacity?
We do not have a formal relationship. We are just always telling them what we think. So it's, yes, an advisory capacity. We have a governing body here locally called the Executive Committee, and that group decides what our policy positions are with the city, and of course with input from members. And then that's what we share with the city when we speak at city council meetings, or when we write, and also, you know, with other governments in mid-Missouri.
And Keith Paletti has put on our chat a link for the Inflation Reduction Act guidebook to the White House. So I would encourage people to look at that, and hope, and maybe we'll share it also. So I just wanted to comment on that.
And I could add on that too.
Yeah,
Sierra Club
sure.
is going to try, and we're going to try and put together a presentation for later in the year on, you know, some of the incentives that are coming out from not locally here, because those are easy to find, but the state and the federal ones, so that, you know, everybody can figure out how do I do this? What can I get help with? You know, because there's going to be all kinds of different incentives because of that Inflation Reduction Act. And so we'll probably have an educational webinar on that.
Great. Okay, another question from Christine Dorr. Some of the new private houses seem as big as small hospitals. How does the city charge for their higher energy use? Got some.
Yeah, so basically right now the electricity rates are tiered. So there's a base charge, and then there's tier 1, 2, 3, and 4, I think. And so the more you use, the more, as you go up into those higher tiers, the more you use, the higher you jump into the next tier, and each of those tiers costs more. So it's beneficial to, you know, try and stay down in tier 1 with your energy use. And I should mention too that the utility and the city council are going to be pursuing electricity rates this year, electricity rate changes this year, and those are not related to renewable energy conversion. Those are just, you know, business as usual. And so, but one thing that you can do along that lines is, if you're interested, is ask the city not to raise the base rate. So we each pay a certain fee to be a Columbia Water and Light customer, and then we, you know, pay graduated amounts depending on how much electricity you use. Sierra Club would like to see the base rate stay flat, and then, you know, all of the cost increase go into those tiers, because that way it incentivizes people to use less energy, because the more they use, the more they have to pay. But if your base rate goes up, then, you know, to a certain extent, you've got to pay that anyway. So that would be something that you could contact city council and the mayor about, to say, hey, leave the base rate alone, put all the changes in the tiers.
Right, and that's a equity issue too for
It is.
lower income people. Another question from Sharon Schneeberger. Will the next new public school include solar panels for energy use? Do you know?
I do not know, but that is something that definitely will be a school board decision. So I would recommend that people contact their the school board and express support for that. And there certainly are incentives that the school could take advantage of. But the current building codes only mandate that the building be built solar ready, meaning that it has to have a layout and a design that would support solar panels. It does not mandate that they have to install solar panels.
Good to know. Thank you. Let's see, right now that's the end of our questions. I had a question that we just briefly talked about at the beginning before people signed on. Was your beginning slide. I asked about the artwork on it and where that came from, and you talked about a heat program. I thought you might want to share that with the viewers. It was pretty interesting.
Right. So the first slide, and I can flip back to that, is it was a mural that was created during a event that they held around a project the city did called Show Me the Heat. The city actually was able to get involved with a grant and as part of a study that was being done in several cities across the country to map our heat islands, because the way with the increasing heat, different parts of the city will seem hotter and will be hotter than others, depending on how much concrete and asphalt and trees or lack thereof the part of the city has. And so it's important to know where the hottest part of the cities are, because that way you can focus, perhaps planting more trees or doing other things that need to be done to help with that. And so last year, one of the hottest days of the year, the city had recruited numerous volunteers for this Show Me the Heat project, that they went around town mapping what the temperature was. And then all this information was fed into a project team that, they're going to analyze it and give the city back some information. But as part of that, the city held a little festival to do like education for people about climate change and what the city's engaged in and energy efficiency. And the kids created this really cute mural. I thought it was really nice. So I think it's very colorful and fun, even though it's talking about climate change.
Okay, let me check and see if we have, just a comment from Jim Holson. Carolyn, great success on the plan and awesome presentation. So yes, I think this was really very helpful to all of us. I encourage everyone to share this YouTube with people and actions with their friends. As Carolyn mentioned, today's the last day to comment on the renters survey of renters. Yeah, right. And I'll send an email out on that. Let's see, Earth Day is coming up, and the League of Women Voters will have a booth, and I know there's going to be a rally April 21st. Hopefully we'll speak at that also.
Right.
There's a lot to do.
Just for everybody's on their calendar, that MU is having a climate rally on
oh yes, yeah,
April
it's MU.
21st.
Right, and
It's going to start at noon.
The league to have a speaker there, so we haven't gotten back to them, but we'll probably do that. So we'll try to be full-fledged partners. And again, I encourage everyone to share this with everyone. Thank you so much, Carolyn. And lastly, I want to mention that our next Lunch and Learn program is March 14th, Tuesday, and our guest will be Janet Thompson, who is the Boone County Commissioner, and Stephanie Browning, who's the head of the Columbia Boone County Health Department. And they will give us an update on the allocation and use of ARPA funds and take questions. So that's next month, Tuesday, March 14th. We hope you'll attend, and please spread the word. Thank you so much, Carolyn, for all your work. Excellent presentation, excellent information. And thank you everyone for attending. Thank you, Lauren.
Thanks, everyone.